Hello and welcome to The Living Room, brought to you by Curzon Home Cinema. If you're watching this live, you can join the conversation in the comments on YouTube. Anna Kerrigan's second feature as writer-director is the hugely accomplished Cowboys, a moving, visually rich off-road movie about two parents coming to terms with their child's identity. It's impressively acted, none more so than by lead actor Steve Zahn, who I am delighted to welcome here today. Hello, Steve.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I'll open with a couple of questions myself, and then hopefully we'll get some audience questions as well. Let's start with your receiving Anna's script. What was your response when you first read it?
Oh, I was blown away by it. I mean, it's really one of maybe 3 or 4 scripts that I sat down, read, and thought, man, I got to be in this. I have to be in this. And where, you call and plead your case, and usually is the kiss of death. Like, I'm perfect for this. It means you don't get the part. But I was blown away by it. I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful script, and I'm attracted to things, scripts where the environment is as much of characters as the people, and it kind of had everything, and it was just a beautiful father-son story that I adhered to.
I want to come to the landscape in a moment, and the way it's filmed and the role it plays. But just staying with the character of Troy, was he pretty much there on the page right from the beginning, or was he fleshed out more fully once you were on board and you were discussing with Anna the role?
Well, you always flesh it out, but it was really there. I mean, it was beautifully written. I mean, she wrote an amazing script. I mean, it's rare when it's right there. But of course you flesh it out and you adjust according to the cast and who you're acting opposite and all that. But I think everybody was well defined, and really knew what their job was and the tone of it. Sometimes the tone is, I've done so many movies where you read something and you go, okay, well, this is the tone. This is I think how it's going to end up, and you're completely wrong, and then you might have other people involved that come from totally different places, and you have to kind of find this middle ground of, is this supposed to be funny? I thought it was supposed to be funny, or whatever. But this was pretty clear.
It's one of the interesting things about the film that obviously it has a huge emotional weight, but you also have these lovely light moments. Anne Dowd's character, for a start, is a really great example that you don't have a stereotypical cop. You've
right.
got some, and it feels like with each of the characters that Anna's created, they're just various layers that get peeled away as we progress through the narrative.
Yeah, totally. And, I always gravitate towards trying to find the lightness, the humor and things. And there's always room for humor, I think, even in tragedy, and then with Sasha, I mean, we got along so great, and things, we just kind of, there were times when we were shooting where, this kid was just phenomenal, and all we had to do is just get on the back of a horse and just see what happened. And I never doubted once that we weren't going to be able to deliver, just because Sasha was so amazing, and so responsive and listened and reacted, and was living in moments, which was really ideal and also surprising for a kid that age.
Did you get to spend much time with her before you actually began shooting? With him, sorry, before you actually began shooting?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, that's one thing that Anna and I talked about. I was like, hey, I think it's important, that I come out early, like really early, so that Sasha and I could like hang out. And so I was out there like 2 weeks early, And we rode horse and hung out, went out to dinner, and I got him into like pool hall, you know, at like, what was Sasha, like, I forget, 11 years old or whatever. And it's like playing pool, taught him pool at a proper joint, you know. So we were really tight by the time we shot and really comfortable with each other. And I thought that was just, that's so important. You know, nowadays you do a movie and you're lucky sometimes to get a really extensive, you know, a complete rehearsal just before you shoot. You know, now it's, you know, let's go. And with digital, it changes the dynamic of making a movie. You know, when it was filmed, you were limited. There was a limit. There was a certain amount of film, and it cost a certain amount of money. And so you rehearse things, not only for you, but for the camera and for lights, for everything. And now it seems like there's more of a rush. I'm going off a little bit, but you know, it's like, hey, let's shoot the rehearsal. And I'm always like, hey, let's not. Let's just rehearse, and then we'll save time because we'll know what we're doing. So the point being that we had a lot of time to work.
And obviously, you've got a huge amount of experience, and you've got a great deal of stage experience. In contrast to Sasha, who it's probably one of the first pieces of work that he's actually done. So, did you feel that during that sort of rehearsal process that you were sort of building up this relationship of bringing your experience to what you would do with the role, and kind of building up Sasha as helping him build up that character?
Yeah, it's a weird kind of dance you play, because you're working on your own thing, but at the same time you know that you have to somewhat guide, you know, a young, more inexperienced actor into this world. So how do you do that? You don't do it, you know. I've worked with a lot of kids, and they're all different, you know, but I always find, like, you know, kids usually go and they learn their lines, you know, they learn their lines, the words that they say, and forget about the interaction, the listening, you know. So what you want to do is kind of knock them off their base a little bit. Like, you know, it's always good. Like I would always just screw around, you know, as camera was rolling, like, you know, add action or say something completely different, you know, or even a physical, like, little nudge to get them off, like, whoa, what? There's a different reaction. All of a sudden they're alive, as opposed to like, all right, hit your mark and say your line. So you develop that. Yeah, you develop a way of kind of in conjunction with Anna, like kind of directing in a way, you know.
But there's also that element of the performance outside of the moments of speaking. There's so much looking going on in this film.
Yeah, there is, which I love. There's nothing like a day when you don't talk, you know. I mean, it's so wonderful, you know, when you're shooting something that you just have to kind of be present, and you can let anything happen. And I don't know, you know, we talked a lot about that too, like how we were going to shoot it, and if we were going to cross shoot and do, you know, so that we could, you know, keep it alive and fresh all the time. And we did, for the most part. Yeah.
And what's also interesting with the way the story plays out, we're obviously rooting for Joe from the outset, but Troy's character is more problematic, and we know he means well with his decisions, but his decisions might not always be the wisest.
Right.
I'm curious to know about the discussions that you had with Anna about Troy, and not necessarily making him a likable character, but just how he would come across in the initial stages with audiences.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, you know, I wanted to play, you know, him when I was with Sasha. when I'm with my son, it's almost like a buddy movie, like they're pals. The role of dad is I didn't want to hit that hard. And when he's manic with his bipolar, I wanted that to be like, I don't know, he's the funnest guy in the world if you're in that mode. You know what I mean? If you want, if you're not in that mode, then he's not very fun. But a real playful, kind of youthful guy, that was pretty simple.
It's
What
great.
you see is what you get. He doesn't lie.
Yeah.
That was one thing. I was like, he doesn't lie. He always tells us the truth, which sometimes, we edit ourselves all the time just because of the circumstance or the people we're with. It's just easier. He can't edit himself like that. He's which I thought was kind of beautiful and a fault at the same time.
But it's always great to see as well that a character who perhaps has bipolar is not just behaving in one single mode. And we have that fantastic sequence where he's in the bar with his friend, and obviously you can tell he's becoming more manic. Then he goes to the boot shop and he just wants to have fun. Then suddenly it takes another turn. Could you talk a little bit about the challenges with your performance now? Because it is quite a wild shift in his behavior across a very short period of time.
Yeah. No, I mean, we clocked that pretty, was pretty specific with that. What were the levels and how much was too much and how low do you want to go? I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know. The simple answer is I kind of wrote in the script like, hey, revving up here. You know what I mean? Here's the here. Remember this day, you're at the top and you're flying. You're digging up there. It wasn't, we changed digging a hole to like raking, that scene where he's raking leaves for his, for his brother-in-law and kind of raking at a fast pace, energetically.
The other thing I was going to ask, just in terms of Troy's character and how the audience engaged with him, was the non-linear element for storytelling always there in the script, or is that something that Anna came to in the editing so that we sort of move about in time?
Yeah, I mean, some of that, that's a good question. I'm really simple, and I when I watch a movie, I'll shoot it, but then I'll go watch a movie, and you could cut 4 scenes, and I'll forget until you remind me, like, hey, remember that one scene? I'm like, oh, right. Why isn't that in there? Some of that was in editing, so, but a lot of it was in the script, and I remember that being a concern, like how are we going to tell this story? How is it going to be clear that we're bouncing around? Yeah, which is always difficult, but I thought that was really cool too.
I've got a question here from Michael Black. Did you find that this was a film as much about life in rural Montana as it is about trans issues? And I imagine this is a kind of story that might have been very different had it been LA or New York.
Completely. That's what I thought was so great about it and interesting. And yeah, you're right. It is as much about just kind of, most of America, which is a rural, smaller town. I live on a farm in Kentucky. I mean, I'm really, really critical of things that where small towns and people who live in the country are portrayed. And this movie, I knew that Anna had spent a lot of time in smaller towns, and she'd spent a lot of time in Montana and had a real voice for it. And I thought that was really critical and one of the reasons I thought it was so authentic. And that was part of my convincing her. I said, look, I just know this guy. I know all these people really well, people who sometimes get, stereotyped, and yet once you sit down with them, you realize, oh man, we're a lot more alike than I thought, you know. And you know, people living in small towns, it's tough, and they do the best they can with the hand they're dealt. And unfortunately, Troy and Jillian and I had a pair of twos playing poker, which is tough to win. You got to bluff a lot.
It's also interesting you say about stereotyping. It's not just the characters. It's the representation that we have of masculinity, and the concept of the Western within even genre. It is playing with this idea. Don't expect cliches. Don't take this as what life is actually like.
Right, and yet the vehicle is the Western, which is the most kind of like overtold. You know, it's the American myth. It's it, right? It's our story, you know, that we like to tell over and over again with just different characters in a different town with a different thing going on. So I thought that was really interesting. It's like, it was written, but it was also in post, like made into more of a, there were hints of it being more of like a traditional Western kind of thing, this other backdrop, which I thought was cool. But the idea of masculinity and what does that mean? It's so, is it a shirt?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Is it my shirt right now? Is this like, you know, it's so ridiculous, you know?
And we see that great scene in the where you all go bowling, and I just love that moment of seeing it play out in slow motion, as though this, on one level, this is seen as the image of what men do, but they could have been talking about anything. They could have been doing it. It could have been so against what you'd expect.
Right. Yeah, the slow motion of like arms and, you know, cowboy boots and, you know, it's really cool. I love that. Yeah.
But there's also then that lovely moment where you look across and just sort of wink and say, I know you're looking. I know what you see. Don't think this is everything.
Yeah. I mean, he just loves his kid so much. It's, you know, it's so beautiful. It moved me so much when I read it. I was just, you know, just a story about love and acceptance. It's really remarkable, and he is so accepting. You know, it's the opposite of the stereotypes. Really, you'd think the dad would be all bent out of shape about it, and mom would be cooler, but it's really the opposite. You know, he's all in. You know, even when he's confronted with it the first time, he's like, "Fine, great. How can I help you?" You know, and he helps in the best way he can, which is like, I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to take you to Canada. I think they're going to treat you a little better up there. It's beautiful.
I think that's another thing that I really loved about the film is that scene where he's confronted with it in the car the first time. It just made me realize, and you have it again then at the very end of the film on the school bus, of just watching a narrative in which the characters are just accepting. There's not a question. There's not a but.
Right.
It's just like that's who you are, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. It's a really short scene. It's a really compact. And when we shot that, that was, you know, this was a little movie, man. You know, run and gun. And I remember I didn't shoot the scene before, and they were like, "Hey, go to the fairgrounds." And I go to the fairgrounds. There's not a truck, nobody. And I'm sitting in my truck waiting. And I know that Sasha turns into a pumpkin at like 9:30, right? Kids can't work past a certain hour. They're just out. They're out 9:30. They didn't even roll in there till like 8:30. And people are running. I was throwing pants and costume on, like on set. Like it was crazy. And we had, I would say, 20 minutes to shoot that scene. And that's a pretty important scene, you know? And I just remember sitting with Sasha going like, "Hey man, we got to kill it. Like, we got to do this, man, in 20 minutes. Like, let's get our acting hats on and go to work." And Sasha was great. Yeah.
Just want to come back to the landscape. What was the actual shoot like once you were out on the road or on the mountain?
Oh, it was beautiful, man. It's like that's up in Glacier National Park up in Montana. It's just tremendous, man. Those mountains are just beautiful. And I'm a big fly fisherman. And when I wasn't working, I was fishing by myself on some river, 2 miles up with bear spray and the whole thing. And oh man, it's something, I'd never been up there, but it's really fun to do a movie where you cannot wait to go to set and hang out. Every set was just like, okay, we're going to hang here for the day. Wow. What a crazy job. It's so silly when you really break it down. We're out there with cameras and stuff with makeup on, pretending we're other people. We're recording it. It's like crazy. It's insane. It's great. It's such a great job.
And obviously not a huge production, so you're not going to have a big trailer and an enormous 3-course lunch and things like that.
No. At first, we were all sharing a trailer, and I was like, "You guys, we can't all share the trailer." Ann Dowd can't. I'm not going to share a trailer with Ann Dowd. Come on, Ann is like an icon. She has to have her own trailer. I'll have my truck. I got my truck. I'm fine. I got my Bluetooth. I can change pants in the truck. I've done it before. So my truck was my trailer. It was great. But it's so fun when look, I love just making movies in general. And sometimes, a lot of times those smaller kind of deals are just, I don't know, there's something about them that are so fun and remind you why you're doing it,
I've got a question here from Rob from London, and he said, I've seen so many performances going back to Out of Sight where you play characters who are just slightly on the edge.
Yeah.
You're one of a few actors to equal Christian Bale in pushing the limits. Obviously, that's in Werner Herzog's Rescue Dawn. How much does physicality come into creating a role?
Oh, a lot. A lot of it. It depends on the part, really, but that's very important to me. And it might be something minor. It might be something silly. It might be a mustache. It might be heavy boots. It might be losing 40 pounds, for like Werner's movie, which I had never done before, but I found that to be really, it was quite a process, not only physically, but how that really, how that affected, my thought process of the character and the film and everything. I come from the theater. It's important, all those physicalities and the things that you come up with. That's the fun part, that's why I'm attracted to those characters. Something a little off, something a little askew. Why is this person interesting? Why do we laugh at this person? They're totally serious about everything they say, but that's funny, and it's by itself, right? Somebody who takes themselves. I don't know. Yeah, I'm always attracted.
Do you feel you have like a specific in with a character? Is it whether it's a style of talking, or is there a way that a process that you journey towards creating a character generally, or does it depend with each project?
It depends on each project or where my head's at too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes I read it and I'm doing it. And I don't know how to explain that. You're like, oh yeah, I got this. I understand this. And it's almost impossible to try to explain that to like a director. Like, I just get it, man. Like, I don't know. And I don't say that about everything. Sometimes we go do movies and we pay the bills, and we try to make that as complicated and as great as possible. And then there are other times when, you play Troy and you've got a lot of work to do, I don't know, man. It's an interesting question.
I've got a question here from Jennifer in London. What was the toughest scene for you in the film?
Well, the hardest scene was my breakdown with Joe, where I'm at the end of my road. I go from manic to just broken. And I knew that had to happen in a split second. I'll tell you a story. This is crazy, man. When I shot that scene, we were at altitude. I was a little dehydrated. We were doing this. I was like, hey, how are we going to shoot this? Because I don't know how often I can do this, how many times I can do this. And they had 2 cameras rolling, and we shot that scene, and I'm weeping, right? And it's great. And I get a migraine in my head, and it's major, to the point of where you see me touch the back of my head. They said, cut. And I said, I need a minute. And they all knew something was wrong. And it was like, I said, let's shoot again about 5 minutes later. And I couldn't remember any of it. I couldn't remember the scene. I couldn't remember a lot of things. So I went to the hospital, and they did an MRI, and my brain's fine. And he explained it to me. He said, it's not a stroke, but it's kind of like a stroke where I couldn't remember what state I was in. It was insane. It was very scary. So we shot that. We did 1 take. That was it. That was my day. And then I felt fine. I went back they were right on this river, and I fished, but,
and nothing's happened since. You've just...
No, it was, he goes, this is more common than you think. People have these, and he explained to me the whole thing. And then 3 hours later, I was fine. Isn't that weird? Scared to shit out.
That is strange and scary.
Yeah.
I've got a final question here from Jamie, who says, having appeared in Dallas Buyers Club, which features a cisgender actor in the lead role, now you have a trans actor playing a trans character on screen. Do you feel, and in conversations that you might have had with Anna, do you feel there's been a significant shift in representation in films, or do you still feel there's a long journey to go?
No, I think there's a huge shift. I mean, I'm kind of the wrong guy to ask. I mean, I'm just a gun for hire, and I live on a farm, but, and I play, bubble pop on my phone. It's ridiculous. But no, there is a definite change. There's a definite trend just recently, yeah.
Which is great. And obviously this film is a fantastic example of that.
Yeah. Anna was like adamant about getting a trans, actor, which I said, man, that's going to be tough. I mean, how are you literally going to do that? Go across the country, and she did it, and she found Sash,
who is quite amazing in the film.
He was, and such a pal, such a smart kid, man. Like, very old soul for sure. Like, really, just really brilliant.
So Cowboys is now on release on Curzon Home Cinema, and when the cinemas, fingers crossed, open back up next week in the UK, hopefully you will have the opportunity to actually go and see the film on hopefully the biggest screen that you possibly can see the film. The next event that is taking place, the Living Room, is on Friday the 21st of May, and that's Christos Nikou, the director of Apples, will be talking about his incredible film. And you can find out more information about the events at live.curzoncinemas.com. But most of all, thank you for joining us today, Steve, and congratulations again on your fabulous film.
Oh, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Bye. We out? Am I out? Should I hang up?
Not yet. No, just one moment.